I'm the editor-in-chief of The Difference. Thanks for coming here to make a difference.
Good morning. Thank you.
All right, let's begin with the Guardian newspaper this morning. And, well, it's like all the papers are talking politics today. Well, the Guardian newspaper begins with suspense as APC orders aspirants to sign withdrawal letter. And of course, you'll see that that's in inverted commas, and one is wondering what that means. But then there are the riders. Filling the form is optional, says Omishore, Fayemi, Pagudu, Akpabio, Oshiomhole. Okay, Akpabio, Oshiomhole swell APC presidential aspirants. There's a rider, again, a third rider. Tinubu, the more, the merrier. Long list of aspirants, good for democracy. Story continues on page 2. What do you make of all of that?
You know, MKO Abiola had this campaign jingle on Nigeria on the march again. We are on the march again.
I thought we were long gone. That was like 1992?
No, we are. This nation is wired for politics. We are wired for politics
Really?
at every point in time. And we've been politicking. And we'll continue politicking. The British came and, joined the politicking. They left us with the politicking. The military came, joined the process. We'll continue with the politicking. So it's going to get a lot more interesting over the coming days. But I think the concern is that as it gets interesting, let it get interesting in a positive sense. That is, we should be getting to the answer, And that was why people were asking questions 2-3 years ago. Say, do we have the right structure to take us to where we are going? I'm not too sure we answered those questions very well, and so you will see a lot more drama going forward.
Well, the papers are definitely replete with that this morning. Of course, also switching to another newspaper, this time the Nigerian Tribune. It's still also talking politics. Well, Guardian is about APC. So is the Nigerian Tribune this morning. 2023, APC extends sale of forms, but PDP postpones LG congresses. Looks like there's a balance on the front page there. A number of riders, more aspirants join presidential race. Fayemi Oshiomhole Akpabio declare ambition. Amosun declares today. Bakare to declare May 9 in Abuja. Pedaro picks nomination form. If given opportunity to be president, I will serve with all my heart. Shimadio tells APC delegates in Taraba, Adamawa. Find all of that on page 2, I guess. But is there anything different now? APC postponing the congresses. It was like everyone is running against time, and at the same time, seems the plot thickens.
It is, and invariably, it was going to get here. We were going to get to this point, because when you micromanage processes, by the time you open the prison gates, everybody wants to make a dash for it at the same time, and I think that's where we are. At a point, there were no candidates. People were saying, would there be candidates? Would there be a program? Should we just give a third term? Because the process was heavily micromanaged. When
micromanaged by who?
By the process drivers. When, for example, when there was talk about, constitutional amendments, constitutional review and itself,
Electoral Act and the rest.
Yeah, Electoral Act and all that. You notice that there was this inclination towards saying, no, there was nothing to change. The system is okay and all that. But the system was not okay. And that's where we are,
Very interesting.
So now you've opened the door, something like what happened with option A4. Everybody come inside. Everybody will just run in, and it's now a gamble. It's a lottery.
Well, interesting way to put all those things. But if you check on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune, you'll still find this one. 2023, UN demands full participation. UN demands full women youth participation. Calls for $350 million humanitarian response plan as Buhari hails world body others on fight against terrorism. Now, in terms of full women and youth participation, one will wonder, what do you make of that? Because there are a number of people that will be wondering how else. I think we've been talking about this youth participation in our politics for quite a while. Who is listening? Unfortunately,
the system drivers are not listening. the youths have been saying, hey, we are 70% of this nation. We want a buy-in into the processes. And then you're asking them to go and look for 100 million to pick up nomination forms? How would they?
No, they don't. Do the youths have to run for president? They can run for local government chairman, House of Assembly.
No, what stops them from running for president? It's a democracy. If an adult can run for president, why can't a youth? It's their country as much as ours. When Macron got up to run, did anybody ask for his birth certificate? No one. So let him run. Let them run. And they have the demographics, and they also understand it's their nation to build. The older people is their nation to get away from. The youth is their nation to build.
Yeah, and the question a number of people have also been asking about that is whether or not youths can organize themselves, and secondly, how that is going to happen.
No, I think it's a moot point, because the youths have always organized themselves. The people who got independence for us were young people. They were young people. How old was Azikiwe? How old was Obafemi Awolowo at the time they were canvassing for independence? They were young people, So youths have always been active. The Nigerian youth movement got in there before the NCNC. So the youth are not, organizing themselves is not a problem. I think the challenge is that the system has been rigged against them. And we need to liberalize the system, because the country is costing us. Because the more tepidity in the process means that the whole country's GDP, the whole country's wealth, the whole country's potential goes down. Nigeria is a laughing stock in many respects across the world. And it's not fair.
That doesn't sound like good news. Let's switch to the Leadership newspaper this morning, and this is what you will find on its front page, also talking politics. 2023 presidency, APC protesters invade APC PDP secretariats, want party tickets zoned to south. That story is on page 4. I don't know what you make of this, because okay, let's check out the riders. APC records high turnout of presidential hopefuls as Fayemi, Badaro, Akpabio, Oshiomhole declare. also joins race today. Party's presidential aspirants now 20. Bakare declares Monday. It's good for democracy, scribed to Tinubu. Oluwepo Hashim picks nomination form today, says new Nigeria possible. Well, seems to have spoken to the lower part, but that major headline, protesters invade APC PDP secretariats, want party tickets zoned to south. I don't know what you make of this.
Yeah, I think that in a sense, you know, we should do things in a more decent, in a more structured manner. The protesters who are raising questions about zoning, they do have a legitimate point. The constitution of the country provides things for things like federal character. It provides things like, balance. It talks about quotas, and all those systems, as it were.
It also talks about the no one part being overbearing on the
other.
Like
so already the infrastructure of the nation is towards, turn by turn, which is actually what, zoning is. And even some of the political parties have already gone ahead to put that either in their own ground rules or in their own internal arrangements, So, and even pronouncements, across time, even by APC governors, for an APC governor, for example, to the effect that the party was already, looking at zoning to the south, in that sense. And understandably, after you have had, from Obasanjo coming down, we have had this turn by turn, north, south, north, south, north, south, in that sense. So the national mood, favors, that arrangement. But that is only half of the question, because the president, who the president is and where the president comes from, is just one part of the equation. The other part is whether the peoples of Nigeria are best served by in the governance arena, and that would require more than zoning. So it's important to zone at the beginning. My own thinking is that you should structure and constitutionally enshrine zoning, as a principle of power rotation for 30 years at the minimum. That's what I would say. Because after about 30 years, you come and review and say, do you still need zoning? But you need to put it there because you need to deal with responses, you need to deal with perceptions. And even the Swiss, looked at it at a point and says, every year they were fighting a Swiss war, inter-Swiss war, and they put zoning in their system. So you have a Swiss president every year, a council of about 6 ministers, and then January 1st every year, a new president takes over. January 1st, it goes to the next zone. January 1st, it goes to the next zone. Switzerland has had stability. It's one of the most stable nations in the world, today. Even the Tanzanians appreciate the fact that they need to build that internal harmony in their system. And they put in place, the Zanzibar and Tanganyika, rotation systems. So when you have political systems like us, that have fault lines, as it were, what you need to do is to put in place a system that will be able to taper the negative possibilities of those fault lines. So zoning just makes sense. It just makes sense. The point when people start just opposing zoning against competence, it's a faulty logic. There's competence everywhere. No, the reason for competence is the reason for competence. The reason for zoning is the reason for stability, inclusion, and management of diversity. There are two different issues. So it's in the party's interest for them to sit down and say, you know what? Because of Nigeria, we would work with a zoning arrangement that would deal with some of these, concerns.
Or should it even be a brainer? Should it be an issue? I mean, I would have thought that understanding of the political permutation or arrangement of Nigeria by the politicians should be a no-brainer. That, I mean, this is the way it ought to be.
You are right. But I suspect that there are a number of factors at play. We've talked about the individuals and their ambitions, people wanting to put out their ambitions. But I think that there is another very important factor. It very well looks to me like this whole confusion, right, is playing into the hands of people who themselves have some axe to grind with the entire processes that is unfolding. And that is unfortunate, because we've got to look at the national interest.
Well, it looks there's so much to unpack in what you have said, but switch to another paper that is also leading with politics, and that's New Telegraph this morning. 2023, only courts can determine fate of ministers who refuse to resign. That story is on page 4, and there is a quote on the front page. Umuahia Federal High Court's ruling of March 18, 2022, which declared Section 8412 of the Electoral Act as amended unconstitutional, has paved the way for political appointees to seek elective offices without resigning their offices before primaries. I don't know. There's still on this side and that side on this particular matter.
Yeah, there is, simply because we have not put our foot on the table. When you make laws are supposed to regulate systems, and this National Assembly, from its first year, it was evident that it needed to deal with issues of a constitutional nature and deal with it quickly. They played bureaucracy with the whole process. Till date, they haven't completed the process of constitutional amendment.
Well, but it has to still go to the states for
yes,
concurrence.
No, but the point basically is that they went on business as usual. This is the final year of the life of this assembly, and you mean that issues of such nature, because a lot of the political complications we're having in the country, whether it is zoning, whether it is resignation, are issues that arose, even issues of big governance. Are we spending too much on government? When this administration was trying to set up ministers in the first place, there were questions raised about whether they needed to have as many as 36 ministers. And finally, I think we ended with about 42. And the explanation was that every state, by the constitution should have one. That was a low-hanging fruit. The National Assembly, recognizing that cutting cost of government was a national priority, would have simply said, you know what, we want to deal with this. Why would constitutional amendments take the whole of 3 years? Why not 1 year? Why not 6 months? If it's a matter of urgent national interest. So we've just played games. I think there's a sense in which the people who get into government think that the government and the country belongs to them. It's not true. They hold it in trust for we the people. And they must work with that mindset. They must come to a point of discipline where they recognize that the people are actually, the office of the citizen is greater than the office of the president, the office of the Senate president, because they're playing games.
Okay. Well, let's switch to New Telegraph this morning. Okay, well, that's the New Telegraph. The Vanguard newspaper this morning is talking politics as well, and this is what you find on its front page. APC hawks pressure INEC to shift deadline for primaries. That story is on page 5. Lobbied, failed to get buy-in of PDP chairman. INEC boss Yakubu rebuffs move. It's not going to happen, says INEC. APC extends deadline for sale of forms, holds congresses next week. Shomole Fayemi, Akpabio, Jigawa Governor Badaru Abubakar joined presidential race. All of that packed on the front page. Of course, INEC has said it's not going to happen. There will not be a shift in the deadline. But where is this coming from?
I made this point that there is a suspicion that people are playing games with these whole processes. And it's important to interrogate the point. There's too much mischief in the air. Why would anyone... INEC sent out this timetable quite a long time ago. The parties got it. The parties did not. They have inter-party, discussions again and again. The parties did not raise the issues. So where is this coming from? If you're not ready, step out. If you're not ready, step out. It's a democracy.
Well, there's this one right below the picture on the front page. Telcos demand 40% increase in voice SMS data tariffs. NCC expert react. Another increase?
Yeah, those are actually the issues that the people on the streets are concerned about. The real Nigerians, not these phony Nigerians, the real Nigerians, they are concerned with where they will find 40% more to make their calls and to do their business by data. That's what the real Nigerians are concerned about. And when you have issues concerning the real Nigeria, whether it is ASU strike or whether it is...
We'll come to ASU, but what do you make of this increase that the telcos are demanding? Of course, they haven't gotten there. We don't know what NCC is saying. The details you'll find on page 27 of the paper. But this demand, a number of people have been... It's something that's been talked about for a little while, and we've had the telecom subscribers president here once who is saying they shouldn't even think about a fraction of 1%, increase. But is there a justification for the demand by the telcos?
I wouldn't give them a justification. But I would say that the telcos would be arguing things like inflation, which is a real factor, security, which is a real factor. So they'll be arguing things, and that a number of these issues not being addressed properly impinges on their cost element and on their bottom line. Those are the issues they will be raising. Okay. But I would also expect that, given the fact that incomes have not risen also for the average subscriber, there should be discussions, there should be negotiations across the line. It's just like the thing about whether you want to increase meter cost of electricity services, or whether you want to increase cost of air tickets, in that sense, or even bus fares. There should be negotiations and discussions. But even more importantly, it also points to the fact that we are poorly governed. Because if we are better governed, some of these factors would be addressed. When a business owner says, I'm spending 60-70% additional cost on generating, alternative power, it's a factor.
Absolutely. Well, you spoke to ASU. ASU strike, protesting students shut Benin City. That story is on page 6. Of course, we've been hearing that the, NANS wants to take some action, demonstrate, express their grievances, their displeasure with the continued ASU strike, but I hope it doesn't get out of hand.
We hope so. We hope so. And it's in the interest of the system managers, that instead of all of them going to pick up nomination forms to be president, to solve the existing problem. The Minister of Labour has picked up his form. The Minister of State for Education has picked up his form. The Minister of Education, we can find him. It's in the interest of the system managers to ensure that they sit on this and fix the problem. The ASU strike is quite an unfortunate one. It should not have happened. It has happened, and it should not have lasted the better part of 2 months going into 3 months with, honest discussions. And I think that government should do everything possible to ensure that it ends now.
Well, the back page of Vanguard has sports. Real Madrid shock Man City. Find the details on the inside pages and the number. Okay, it's the stories on the back page, but quite a host of others. Madonna's Hand of God jersey sells for £7 million. I won't even try to calculate the naira value of that. Mr. and Mrs. has this one. So Mr. is sitting down at the dining table and protesting to Mrs. This food is served cold. Why? I like my tea, coffee, custard, and so on hot, very hot, and you know it. And Mrs. responds, well, I was thinking of a way to cure your hot temper.
Hot for hot.
Let's take a look at the Nigerian News Direct this morning. And what do you have on its front page? Telcos, 40% tariff hike. Nigerians to pay more on calls, text messages, data. That story is on page 2. You already spoke to that. But it's still a proposition, I hope.
Yeah.
Okay. South 2023 presidency. We're not interested in zoning. That's ascribed to Southwest women. What does that mean?
Well,
there are women we have been saying that
all kinds of cards have been put on the table and all kinds of interest.
Playing out.
I don't know how many the women are, and I don't know who the southern women are. So They say the devil is in the details.
Okay, most certainly. The inside pages has the details then. Daily Trust newspaper has this one on its front page. Guterres to Buhari, how to defeat terrorists. As a lead story on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning, and a number of writers you'll find on the front page. Says violence casting shadow of death over many Nigerians. UN OK's fresh $351 million humanitarian aid for Nigeria. We're glad the world has not forgotten us, Buhari tells UN scribe. Well, that's what you have on the front page of the paper this morning. And what do you make of both, whether it's the lead story or the writers?
Yeah, I think we need to defeat terrorism. We need to defeat terrorism. And I do not think we have done enough. I think the UN is spot on to have done its own intervention. But again, I also think that we need to get to the bottom of the issues and to also note that there were some dimensions that may not have been covered. For example, we have the terrorism in the northeast, which seems to have been the focus of this visit, going to Borno and, all that responding in that sense. But we also know that the terrorism has expanded across beyond the northeast. For example, in the northwest. Conveniently or inconveniently, it is tagged banditry, but the dimensions of the crisis, for example, look at the demands from the Kaduna train, issues. Those are not bandit demands. Bandits are generally scavengers, economic, hustlers in that sense. By the time people start asking for, we want our leaders, or we want our people to be set free as a condition, part of conditions for negotiations, then you know that they are talking about organized formations that are bigger than economic, scavengers, in that sense. So we are dealing with terrorism, and it would have been good, for example, for Guterres to have gone to Kaduna. It may also have been good for him to have gone to Plateau and Benue. In that sense, it could have been good to arrange so that they would have a fuller picture of the terrorisms we are dealing with. Because if you deal with the terrorism in the northeast, right, there's migration. So that's the issue. Before we start talking about other theaters, you know, and there are other theaters at the moment.
Well, so much to unpack in that one. The details, of course, you'll find on the inside pages, page 5 to be precise. A good number of stories also on the front page. 9 killed, many missing as ISWAP attacks Chibok. Did I hear again? Well, the details, of course, you'll find on the inside pages. And with the Daily Trust newspaper, we have come to the conclusion of the paper's review this morning. Richard Mama, MD, Editor-in-Chief, The Difference, thank you so much for being a part of our program today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
The Sunrise Daily returns right after now. Please stay with us.